organized crime should not be seen in isolation. These gangs often have deep links with terrorist outfits. The money made in gun running, drugs, and smuggling is pumped into terrorism. These groups help with logistics and communication too. Action against organized crime is extremely important in the fight against terror. At times, even activities like money laundering and financial crimes have been known to help terror fundings. Fighting it needs global collaboration. Friends, in such a complex environment, the United Nations Security Council, Financial Action Task Force, Financial Intelligence Units, and the Egmont Group are boosting cooperation in preventive detection and prosecution of illegal fund flows. This is helping the war against terror in many ways over the past 2 decades. This also helps in understanding terror funding risks. Friends, now the dynamics of terrorism are changing. Rapidly advancing technology is both a challenge and a solution. New kinds of technology are being used for terror financing and recruitment. Challenges from the darknet, private currencies, and more are emerging. There is a need for a uniform understanding for new finance technologies. It is also important to involve the private sector in these efforts. From a uniform understanding, a unified system of checks and balances and regulations can emerge. But we must be careful about one thing. The answer is not demonize technology. Instead, it is to use technology to track, trace, and tackle terrorism. Friends, today, cooperation is needed, not only in the physical world, but also in the virtual world too. The infrastructure used for cyber terrorism and online radicalization is disturbing. Some also offer weapons training from a remote location and online resources, communications, travel, logistics. There are many links of the chain in different countries. Each country can and must act against the part of the chain within the reach. Friends, many different nations have their own legal principles, procedures, and processes. Sovereign nations have a right to their own systems. However, we must also be careful not to allow extremists to misuse differences between systems. This can be prevented through deeper coordination and understanding between governments. Joint operations, intelligence coordination, and extradition help the fight against terror. It is also important that we jointly address the problem of radicalization and extremism. Anyone who supports radicalization should have no place in any country. Friends, over the last few months, many conferences have been held in India relating to different dimensions of security. India hosted the General Assembly of the Interpol in New Delhi. A special session of the United Nations Security Council counter-terrorism committee happened in Mumbai. At this No Money for Terror conference, India is helping build global momentum against terror funding. Our intention is to bring the world together in taking the war against terrorism to the next level. Friends, I wish all the participants success in the deliberations over the next few days. I'm positive that you will help in attacking terror funding in all its dimensions. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Prime Minister, sir, for your global vision, your resolve and your clarion call for a collective, effective zero-tolerance approach and your deep guiding insights into tackling the menace of terrorism and terror financing. Thank you, Honorable Prime Minister, sir, for your guiding message. And as we express our gratitude and appreciation to the Honorable Prime Minister.
So you all heard that was PM Modi delivering the inaugural address at the third conference of the No Money for Terror Global Meet. Earlier it had taken place in 2018 and 2019. This is the third such conference, and he made some very salient points. And those are, there must be a cost imposed on countries that support terrorism and must be isolated. He also said certain countries support terrorism as part of their foreign policy and that they support it as their political ideology. My colleague Arunima brings us more context on this. Arunima, that was clearly a dig at Pakistan.
Absolutely. I mean, there's no doubt that India can't have a conversation on terror without pointing out that we have suffered in the hands of state-sponsored terrorism from our neighborhood. And that is what he pointed out. He said terrorism, finishing off terrorism is not a big deal. But the problem is when those terrorists receive state support, when it is becoming an instrument of state policy, then it's the problem. So he's not taking any names, but the message is very clear as to what he means when he says that, terror financing and terrorism without state support is easier to fight. What else he said was that, you can't differentiate. There is this new terminology which has started when you talk about terrorism, about good terror. What he's saying is that it is unequivocal condemnation that every terrorist act must attract. You can't differentiate between terror attacks. And he also pointed out that before the world faced terrorism, in a reference to 9/11, I think, he said India was suffering for decades together. So not mincing his words at all.
Arunima, this is not the sentiment of only India. This is a sentiment that's been echoed by nations from across the world. If you could bring to us some prominent global voices which have pointed out the Pak role in terror and especially harboring terrorists.
International platforms which have dealt with terrorism themselves have gone ahead and underlined Pakistan's role. We know how FATF, grey list is something that Pakistan has just escaped. But the scrutiny of Pakistan's state support to terror activities, terror financing, money laundering, etc., is still being scrutinized. United Nations, Security Council, their resolutions have also named people who are based in Pakistan, and they continue to enjoy state support there. Hafiz Saeed, Maulana Masood Azhar, Dawood Ibrahim, you name them. They're all, India has given evidence that they're all enjoying state support in Pakistan. And because these multilateral platforms have all the top countries of the world there, they have come together to support the evidence that India has put forward, be it 26/7 or be it the attacks that have happened in Jammu and Kashmir, or even the Indian Mujahideen and Lashkar-e-Toiba sponsored attacks in hinterland of India. Those are all part of evidence that India has put forward at multilateral platforms, and that is what has made the world sit up and take notice. That is what is being taken forward today at this two-day conference.
Arunima, as Pakistan has skipped the anti-terror meeting, did they do that to avoid the sort of embarrassment that would be coming their way? Talk to us about the deliberacy of that move.
You know, what we are given, I mean, even though there is no direct answer, and we put this question to Secretary West of Ministry of External Affairs repeatedly yesterday about Pakistan and China not attending this meeting, because Director General of NIA, Dinkar Gupta, said that Pakistan was not attending. The indication that we were given was perhaps at some level the decision was taken to not invite Pakistan onto this platform. China was invited, but the confirmation from China had not come till late yesterday. Even today, the delegation can't be, seen there in the hall still. So there was no official word on China's participation. Pakistan, it seems, even though a government is not officially coming on record to say this, but there are indications that are being given that perhaps because of the role that Pakistan has played, India was not comfortable in making Pakistan a part of this conference. The third edition of this is being hosted in New Delhi.
Arunima, the largest concern is that the funding that goes to terrorists is in a very veiled form, and it's actually disguised as legitimate funding. And PM Modi also spoke about the difference between terrorism and terrorists there, making it very clear that there will be a thorough investigation into all forms of funding and very real efforts to curb the sort of help monetarily that's given to terrorists.
So far, when we had spoken about terror financing, we spoke about only Hawala network, how the Hawala network was utilized to transfer money. But now, technology, the World Wide Web, they're all fresh challenges that have emerged as far as concerned. World over, there is evidence emerging that cryptocurrency is one form of payment that terrorists are considering. In the specific case of India, we've seen how narco, which is drugs and terrorism, those two are playing a role. They're going hand in hand. Narco-terrorism is going hand in hand with terrorism as we know it. There are other ways also of making payments, whereby we are seeing in Punjab, in Jammu and Kashmir, that arms and ammunition are being dropped, especially for Punjab gangsters who are now getting top-end rifles for their work. All of that are forms of payment for carrying out terror conspiracies. So these are new forms of terror financing which have emerged, and that is part of the deliberation, formal and informal ways of financing terror, use of technology, and how international platforms, globally, we should all come together to find a way to those challenges. So there are 4 sessions that will happen over the next 2 days, 2 important sessions to be chaired by Home Minister and External Affairs Minister themselves, and 2 others by MOS Finance and MOS Home. So quite crucial what they discuss and deliberate over these 4 sessions, and what they come out with when a resolution is finally passed.
Thank you very much, Arunima. Stay with us. Let's also go across to Mr. B.S. Jaiswal, a defense expert. Very good morning to you, sir. Thank you so much for joining us. Pakistan, they're conspicuous by their absence at the 3rd conference of No Money for Terror, this time around being hosted by India. Talk to us about how you view their absence at this conference.
Terrorism is virtually part of the DNA of Pakistan, and they have been sponsoring it for very long. It is known to be a haven for terrorists. But notwithstanding the germination of renewed terrorism in India and the world over, this is a matter of concern, and if it is not nipped in the bud itself, it is going to proliferate. So what is required is a comprehensive approach and collaborative within the security establishment of our country, and collaborative with other international forum, wherein shared intelligence is there, shared effort is there, and strong steps taken to isolate countries like Pakistan, which is proliferating terrorism to meet their political ends and ideological ends. So this has to be a very, very comprehensive and collaborative. I'm glad I feel so happy that India is in the forefront in its tirade against terrorism.
Sir, but this is a conference of 75 peace-loving nations. What sort of consensus can these nations reach when those that fund terrorism or harbor terrorists are conspicuous by their absence? There is always talk of isolating these nations, perhaps even proposal of sanctions, but those never really come through.
That's a fact, as a matter of fact, and China is playing a very big role in that. For isolation of Pakistan, they are defending them. Now, there have to be parallel forums like FATF. That's what I said. It should be collaborative. Nations need not wait for the FATF to isolate Pakistan. They should on their own. If trading is hit, Pakistan already is suffering very badly as far as economy is concerned. And if in case they are banned, the banks are banned abroad, you can imagine what will happen. So this collaborative platform of peace-loving nations, they don't have to wait for the FATF to impose sanctions. They can do it on their own. If a nation is responsible, they should take a responsible and a very considered viewpoint that we will decimate terrorism and isolate such like countries. China has been playing a very small part on this.
I wanted to comment on that point that you're making, that individual countries must take action. But you know what we are seeing is that you commit a terror act in one country, and because you enjoy state support, you go and seek refuge in that other country. In that backdrop, cooperation isn't cooperation at multilateral forums between all countries and zero tolerance for terror the most obvious thing. And then if you could elaborate that a world which is sharply divided because of the Russia-Ukraine war, how easy is it to come and bring that kind of cooperation at a platform like this?
You see, the only way out is that if the cost-benefit analysis is done, and these very nations which are proliferating and supporting terrorist activities, if they also suffer, because they are abetting terrorism, they also suffer directly or indirectly, I think the lesson will be driven home. This scourge cannot be decimated till the time the collaborative platform is not strong enough and the cooperation is lacking. So it has to be a comprehensive approach. These nations who are abetting, well, other nations, let them take a step, a conscious and considered step.
Right.
That's the only way. Otherwise, if the cost-benefit analysis is not imposed on these very nations, they will continue with their tirade.
Right. Let me take it forward to Colonel Rohit Dev is also here with us. Colonel Rohit Dev, what we are talking about, that you must impose a cost-benefit relationship as far as those countries who are supporting terror is concerned. But is it easier said than done? Let's talk about our neighborhood only. Pakistan, we all know, global hub of terrorism. But United States of America suddenly, it seems, has turned a softer approach towards Pakistan. They're off the FATF grey list in terms of military hardware, in terms of aircraft and their replacement parts. They are being held by United States. So how easy is it to pin down a country and say that, because you're supporting terrorism, there will be no tolerance? Is that no tolerance for terror more in theory than in practicality as far as the global scenario is concerned?
You are right when you allude to the global response to terrorism because, somebody is terrorist, somebody else's friends at times. But if you see the Indian response, and let me take our mind back to the same government which we have today, and when we had Srimati Sushma Swaraj, God bless her soul, from that period onwards, if you notice your entire, Ministry of External Affairs and all the paraphernalia of the government of the day, including Prime Minister Modi leading it, we have been very, very clear to cut off the taps of funding to Pakistan. We have done it very, very effectively, diplomatically, and in terms of economic terms, through a lot of countries in the Middle East and also the United States of America and other G20 countries. We have been very proactive. We have made an announcement not to speak to the terrorist state until it stops financing and harboring terrorism from its soil. We have been absolutely astute. So if you see India's response, we mince no words now. And for the last 6-7 years, our response has been absolutely accurate. Today, the Prime Minister has got an opportunity, and in Delhi when this, and a global thing is on, he is going to iterate on 2 or 3 things. One is about the funding and one is about the technologies to map it. And today when you see digital transformation of the banking system of the globe, the way you can hit at money, I think there is going to be very, very positive response from the world community as well. And especially as we take the mantle of G20 coming ahead, we will be able to focus more on terrorism because you see any part of the world, you cannot treat this menace of terrorism as a specific state-related or bilateral kind of an issue. It's a global issue. It does not emanate from the hatred of the Pakistanis establishment against the Indian side. It also emanates from the economic powers of the world and also the deep state. So this funding is not designed to a country just because you're an adversary. It can also be to the design that India is a bustling economy today in the world, and people are not going to let it grow at the speed India wants to grow. So they may be friends who will abet some kind of a financing here and there. So I think there is going to be a consortium of nations created where they will pledge that their banking systems and digital transfer of money and everything else will come to fore, and India is going to lead this drive. I mean, make no mistake about it, because our country has suffered the maximum in terms of terror infliction. It's not about the cost we have paid through our sacrifice of our soldiers and
Absolutely,
civilians.
sir. So we are unfortunately completely out of time. I'd like to thank you, Mr. Colonel Rohit Dev, Lieutenant General B.S. Deswal, and my colleague Arnima for joining us with very important perspective and shedding some light on those paramount concerns. Taking a very short break.
Victim. They don't have the mobile of Shraddha. They have not been able to recover the blood-stained clothes of Shraddha. And here you have the accused who is trying to take the police of Mumbai and Delhi for a ride. How do we know there were 35 pieces? Because he is telling. How do we know that the clothes were thrown in a garbage van? He is telling. When Mumbai police called him for investigation, they did not tell Delhi police, they did not alert them that keep an eye on him. The moment the Mumbai police called him for investigation, he destroyed the mobile, sold it off on OLX, as sources say. So definitely, as you said, Arushi murder case, that the last seen theory was that there were 4 people in the house and morning there were 2 alive and 2 were not alive. And even in that, they could not prove the case and CBI had to go for a closure. Definitely here also, you don't have any eyewitnesses. For 2 months, this girl was dead and not one neighbor knew that she was not alive and nobody came to complain. Ultimately, some friend who was watching. So, the issue here is that there are no eyewitnesses, there is no direct evidence, and the police has been unable to get the motive or the
so let me ask
the cleaver or the knife, as we say, that is yet to be recovered.
Today the court, in addition to giving remand, also gave the go-ahead for narco analysis to be done on Aftab. Of course, his consent was sought for it. Narco analysis, Nirmal Kaur, as you very well know, is not admissible as evidence in a court of law. What is the police hoping to garner or decipher through this narco analysis? How is it helpful in a case such as this?
See, the police investigation is not very, now with this national investigation going on into it, people tend to have a view that investigations should be, it shouldn't be that difficult. It's highly painstaking work. It is like looking for a needle in a huge stack of hay. So investigation is not that easy. They have to try all the options. So perhaps that is why they've asked for narco tests, that maybe the truth serum or the narco test will be able to give them something, or at least, give some heebie-jeebies to the accused so that he comes out with some new or, he states some new things out of which maybe 10% truth comes out. So maybe that is what their hope is out of this test. But police has to try every avenue. They cannot let anything go. They
but
don't
ma'am,
know where
whatever he says,
where they'll get a piece of
just give me
evidence.
10 seconds. Whatever he says, and so far Abba Singh is 100% right. Everything that we have known and put out in the public domain is because he has said it. He can very well turn around in court and say, I said none of this. Or I said all of this in duress, under
No,
duress.
even if he, no, his confession is not admissible in a court of law at all.
Yeah.
So that has no value unless it leads to some findings or it leads to some evidence, solid evidence that can be tied up to link the murder with him. Otherwise, his saying anything has no value in a court of law. It's not even admissible under the Indian Evidence
Let
Act.
me ask
His own
Lalita
confession.
Kumaramanglam. This is, I would say, an eye-opener for young women as well as for their families, particularly young women who, you know, want to experience love, want to see people of their choice, and sometimes, you know, families oppose that. But look at the extent to which this case went. I mean, the family had cut off any kind of contact with Shraddha. Shraddha was not talking to them. The fact that she went missing, the family did not even know till 6 months later when the father went and filed a missing persons complaint. I mean, this to me is again one of the sides of the story which we all as parents need to be very, very alert about and you know, aware of.
I agree, Zaka. The fact is, and I've been saying this very loudly for the last few days, that while my sympathies and empathy is with the family, I keep telling people that please don't cut off your daughters because they have done something that you don't like. Make sure that they have somebody, some sort of support system they can fall back upon. More than 90% of the time, domestic violence is never reported.
Yeah.
There is enough now to show that her friends have said very clearly that he used to beat her up, he used to stub his cigarette on her back, and this girl kept quiet. Unfortunately, girls are also taught to adjust, compromise. These words are terrible words, but we are always taught this in India. We are not taught to make a noise. We're not taught to talk to others. We're not taught to reach out and ask for help. And families too often shut off their children from the support that they may need in times like this. You know, this poor child has paid the worst possible price for her reluctance and her incapacity perhaps as a human being because of whatever she's been through in many years from family, from this boy, God knows where else and whom else. She couldn't have even reached out to her friend. She never told them that she was being beaten up. Now this guy, this is the fear that even I have in this case, that this chap is not some ordinary killer. He's not just a pathological liar or anything like that. I think he's doing everything in a very calculated manner. And I
एक पैसा एक पेटी, ये आम आदमी का जो डॉन है ये मांग रहा था. अगर जेई, और फिर इसमें है, डायलॉग में है, तू तो जेई है रे, हमारे पास तो एक्सियन भी हैं. एक्सियन मतलब एग्जीक्यूटिव इंजीनियर. वो तो हमारे देवड़ी पर आकर नाक रगड़ के जाते हैं, यहां पे सब गिफ्ट दे के जाते हैं. तू तो केवल जेई है और तू हमें नहीं दे रहा है, चढ़ावा नहीं चढ़ा रहा है, गिफ्ट नहीं दे रहा है. ऐसे नहीं चलेगा. और इसमें डायलॉग ये भी है, तुझको मैंने इतने बार फोन किया, आजा चढ़ावा चढ़ाने आजा, दिवाली आ गया है, मगर तूने 10 फोन के बाद भी चढ़ावा लेकर तू मेरे पास नहीं आए तो मुझे डीएम को फोन करना पड़ा. सरकारी तंत्र के माध्यम से डीएम को फोन करना पड़ा, डिस्ट्रिक्ट मजिस्ट्रेट को, कि यह कैसे हो सकता है, सरकार हमारी और ये जेई ये आके चढ़ावा ना चढ़ाए. आप तुरंत इस जेई को हमारे पास भेजे, ये हमें चढ़ावा चढ़ाएगा. और कहते हैं डायलॉग में कि देख तू जो आज आया है, ये डीएम ने तुझे धक्के मार के भेजे हैं, तभी तू यहां आया है, वरना तू आता नहीं. और तो और वो कहते हैं कि तुम्हारे, अगर तुमने ये चढ़ावा ठीक तरीके से चढ़ाया तो भविष्य में मैं तुम्हारा स्कोप बड़ा कर दूंगा और बड़ी जगह तुम्हें भेजूंगा ट्रांसफर करके, जिससे उगाही और बड़ी होगी और भेंट और ज्यादा होगा. सोचिए सोचिए जरा, ये पढ़ने वाला स्क्रिप्ट वो तो वीडियो में आएगा, वो तो केवल वो नेता बोल रहा है, मगर मैं चैलेंज के साथ कह सकता हूं ये स्क्रिप्ट लिखने वाला और कोई नहीं, अरविंद केजरीवाल जी ही है. ये केजरीवाल जी इज द ड्राइविंग फोर्स बिहाइंड वॉट एवर वी आर गोइंग टू सी टुडे इन दिस स्टिंग ऑपरेशन. स्टिंग मास्टर का स्टिंग हुआ है, और स्टिंग मास्टर के स्टिंग में आप देखिए मनीष सिसोदिया जी गड़बड़, सत्येंद्र जैन जी का तो बेल कल फिर से रिजेक्ट हो गया है. और आज देखिए उनके एक और बड़े नेता रंगे हाथ पकड़े गए हैं। अब मैं निवेदन करूंगा कि कट्टर भ्रष्ट पार्टी के कट्टर भ्रष्टतम नेता का स्टिंग आपको दिखाया जाए और स्टिंग के पश्चात उसको हम लोग डिकोड भी करेंगे। नेता का नाम अब मैं बेपर्दा करता हूं, उसका खुलासा करता हूं। द सस्पेंस शुड बी ऑफ फ्रॉम द नेम ऑफ द नेता, और नेता का नाम है मुकेश गोयल। मुकेश गोयल वर्तमान में आम आदमी पार्टी के दिग्गज नेता हैं, अरविंद केजरीवाल जी के राइट हैंड हैं, और अरविंद केजरीवाल जी के कहने पर मुकेश गोयल जी को मध्य प्रदेश में प्रभारी के रूप में, हिंदुस्तान के बृहत्तम राज्य, इतने महत्वपूर्ण राज्य में प्रभारी के रूप में मुकेश गोयल जी को अरविंद केजरीवाल जी ने भेजा है। और भूरी भूरी प्रशंसा कि मुकेश गोयल जी कमाल हैं, मुकेश गोयल जी बहुत नॉन करप्ट व्यक्ति हैं, वो तो बिल्कुल भारत माता के लिए काम करते हैं। इस प्रकार के भाषण अरविंद केजरीवाल जी के हैं। और आज मुकेश गोयल जी किस प्रकार से उन्होंने पैसा मांगा और उनका पूरा का पूरा स्टिंग ऑपरेशन आपके सामने भारतीय जनता पार्टी रखती है। यह स्टिंग ऑपरेशन पब्लिक डोमेन में भी, ये तो भला हो आप लोगों का, ये जो चतुर्थ स्तंभ है जिसको हम मीडिया कहते हैं, अगर आप नहीं होते तो ये सब पकड़ में नहीं आता। ऐसा ही एक जागरूक पत्रकार ने इस प्रकार का स्टिंग ऑपरेशन बनाया है और यह आज पब्लिक डोमेन में है। मैं चाहता हूं कि इस वीडियो को चला करके अरविंद केजरीवाल और मुकेश गोयल जी की जो सांठगांठ है उसे आप लोग दिखाएं।
नमस्कार साथियों, स्वागत है आपका एमसीटीवी की लीक में। आज हम आपके सामने एक ऐसे व्यक्ति का स्टिंग ऑपरेशन दिखा रहे हैं जो दिल्ली म्युनिसिपल कॉर्पोरेशन का एक बड़ा नेता है, जिसकी पहचान एमसीडी के बड़े बड़े नेताओं से है और जो खुद एमसीडी के बड़े बड़े पदों पर रह चुका है। आज जो खुलासा हम करने वाले हैं वो दिल्ली की राजनीति को पलट कर रख देगा। दोस्तों, ये व्यक्ति आखिर है कौन, किस पार्टी का नेता है, अभी हम आपको दिखाएंगे। दरअसल ये दिल्ली की सत्ताधारी पार्टी आम आदमी पार्टी का नेता है मुकेश गोयल। हाँ दोस्तों, ये वही भ्रष्ट नेता मुकेश गोयल है जो कि इस समय मध्य प्रदेश आम आदमी पार्टी का प्रभारी भी है। ये देखिए, मुकेश गोयल और एमसीडी के एक कर्मचारी के बीच रिश्वत की डील हो रही है, जिसमें अठन्नी चवन्नी और माता पिता की गालियों का भी डिस्कशन चल रहा है। और कथित आम आदमी पार्टी का ये नेता मुकेश गोयल पैसों की वसूली के लिए किस तरह धमका रहा है। देखिए हम स्टिंग ऑपरेशन शुरू करने वाले हैं, तो ध्यान से देखिए दोस्तों, ये सनसनीखेज खुलासा दिल्ली के भ्रष्ट एमसीडी नेता मुकेश गोयल को।
That's a conference being held by Sambit Patra where the sting operation is being shown. This is against AAP MLA Mukesh Goel, and apparently this is something about accepting a bribe, and the BJP says this is a very important sting operation which will expose the real face of the Aam Aadmi Party. Yet another dig coming in there to that Kattar Imandar tag from Sambit Patra, and also Sambit Patra touching upon the point that Aam Aadmi Party has said that the BJP is just scripting a picture, and that they are just script writers and filmmakers, and everything that they say is completely fictional. But Sambit Patra, they're saying we're countering that with a sting operation which has been done by a journalist on AAP MLA Mukesh Goel. This is coming just ahead of the MCD polls which will be taking place on December 4th. And AAP MLA Mukesh Goel there apparently on camera, and a sting operation has been done upon him. Remember, he was a Congress leader who had joined the Aam Aadmi Party just last year, with Sambit Patra saying that he is the right hand aide of Arvind Kejriwal.